Hello everybody, welcome to the YouTube channel Mav's Outdoor Adventures, and today I'm going to prepare a very simple elk roast. So in the front here I have an elk roast from the rear quarter, and I'm going to trim up the silver skin and trim off any other fat. It's really important to remove all silver skin and all fat on deer, venison, or elk meat. The fat on venison and elk meat just doesn't taste the same like beef fat. It can be very strong tasting and gamey tasting. So again, it's important for venison and elk meat to remove all the fat, all the sinew that you can, and all the silver skin as well. Then we're going to do a simple preparation of just in the oven, in a Dutch oven pot, with just a simple pepper and salt, a little olive oil, and a little Worcestershire for flavoring. Stay tuned. So I've got both a boning knife, and this roast has been removed off the bone already when I was in the field. And I have a fillet knife. And a very sharp fillet knife is ideal for trimming off this silver skin. So let me get started here. I like to make a little cut just under the silver skin and just peel it away, getting as very little meat on the silver skin as possible. And here I'm pulling up to add a little tension and just letting the sharp knife slide along the skin. And again, I'm trying to get all the silver skin that I possibly can off of this roast. And that'll help eliminate a lot of gamey flavor as well. Here's some fat, so we'll take that off. And from being in the freezer for 2 months, the fat kind of yellowed out. That's another reason to trim off the fat, is to get rid of the little bit of tiny bit of freezer burn. But the fat helps protect certain sections of the meat from freezer burn, so I leave it on at the time of butchering, and I prefer to remove silver skin and fat right before preparation for cooking. You can see here I'm just kind of like filleting a fish, just filleting away those pieces of silver skin. This is where a fillet knife is invaluable when you're butchering, because the thinness and the flexibility of the blade, and of course the sharpness, allows you to get that knife and slide right under the silver skin, staying between the meat line so that you don't remove too much of the meat. And here you can see there's a very little thin slice of meat there, but important to get the silver skin off. And take your time in working it. And this, as you can see here, is a very thick piece of fat and sinew. Sort of a mixture of fat, sinew, and silver skin all at once here. Trying to work the camera angle here a little bit, so you can see what I'm doing and how I'm removing it. And what I've got here, this is 2 muscle groups within the roast. So I've got both, from the rear quarter, I've got a top round, which is right here, And then I have a bottom round, which is right here. But now you can see that layer of fat and silver skin that I'm going to remove. And this will greatly enhance the flavor of your meat when it's done cooking, because I find that fat and silver skin are really gamey tasting. And that's a tough piece of fat. Look at that. This knife is fillet knife sharp. You can see here very little meat is attached to this piece of fat and silver skin. And that gets thrown away when I'm done. And here I'm separating the rest of this top round. So I've actually got 2 roasts here. So this is a big piece. And a lot of times when you have your meat butchered for you at the butcher, they don't go into this detail, because as you can tell, it's time consuming and painstaking to take the time to get this fat and sinew and silver skin off the meat. But I find it's a must to end up with a great tasting product for the dinner table. So a lot of butchers, they aren't going to spend the time to do what and that's got a good little bit of meat to it I couldn't avoid, so I'm going to cook that up for the dog's dinner bowl tonight. I'm removing a little bit of freezer burn here, even though the meat was double wrapped. And there I have the roast. Just a small little roast for the pot, but it's trimmed up, cleaned, and ready to go. And here I have both elk roasts prepared with most of the fat and sinew that I can trimmed off of each of the roasts. And at this point, and they're nice and cool to the touch, at this point you can salt and pepper, add whatever seasonings you'd like, add a little cooking oil into perhaps a small Dutch oven, and you can bake at 325 for approximately 35 to 40 minutes, and then you can test to doneness whether you like medium rare or medium or well done. Most of my elk roasts I will cook to a medium rare, and then if I happen to slice it later and warm it up, then it'll be cooked to a medium. Because I prefer to put it in a brine for several hours. And it's a simple brine of water and 1/8 of a cup of salt. So pouring the salt here. We're going to add the water. And 1/8 of a cup of kosher salt. And a lot of times I will go for 4 cups of water. We'll stir this around to try to dissolve as much of the salt into the water as possible. And I like to brine wild game because then it takes and it tenderizes it a little bit more, but also it takes and helps hold in the moisture when I'm cooking it, so I end up with a nice moist meat. And here 2 cups of water just doesn't quite cover the roast, So I'm going to add another cup or two of water, because when you're brining your meat, you want to make sure that the water in the brine covers the meat. And here you can see I added enough water to cover the meat, and most of the kosher salt, the eighth of a cup of kosher salt to 4 cups of water, has been dissolved. So now I'm going to cover up the roast, and I'm going to chill it in the refrigerator, at which time I'll remove the roast, rinse it off with fresh water, pat it dry, let it air dry for about 30 minutes. While I removed both of the elk roasts out of the refrigerator and drained off the light kosher salt brine, then the meat has been brining for about 6 to 7 hours. I like to brine it. It takes, and one, helps tenderize it, adds a little more infusion of salt to the meat besides the surface application of salt. And most importantly, brining takes and draws the blood out of the meat, and just makes a better table fare. Like say when you're cooking wild game like deer venison or elk meat, there's very little fat in it. It cooks much faster than say a beef roast would or a beef steak would. And so you got to take a little bit of care in handling and in cooking times. So I've already now pre-seasoned these roasts with a simple salt, some sea salt, some black pepper, and a little dried garlic flake, and added a dab of Worcestershire sauce, add a little bit more flavor. And here you can see the roast here. It's all seasoned. And that beeping you heard is my oven, which I preheated the oven to 325 with a small Dutch oven with about 2 tablespoons of cooking oil. And I'm now going to take these roasts out and place it into the Dutch oven. And then I'm going to roast it for about 35 to 40 minutes. Like I say. Okay, well, my little Dutch oven here is very hot. I'm going to add both of the elk roasts. Oh, that's sizzling. Oh, that's going to be wonderful. These look a little large, but wild game does shrink up quite a bit. Going to add the lid here, and going to put this in the oven for about 35 to 40 minutes, and we'll come back and check. Going to add the timer. I'm going to get my meat thermometer. So I'll use this thermometer just to check the temperature of the meat. But I generally like to cook my elk roast or venison roast to about a medium rare. And well, it's been 35 minutes in the oven at 325 degrees. I've taken the pot out, removed one of the roasts, and I've let it rest for 7 minutes or so. And it's important to let the meat, any meat, rest when it comes out of the oven before you cut into it, because as it rests, the meat starts to absorb some of the juices back into the meat itself. If you cut it right away out of the pot when it's steaming hot, your juice will just go all over the place. So this elk roast, you can see it's shrunk down. As I mentioned, they're very lean. They're not. This meat isn't fatty like beef, so it tends to shrink up quite a bit. It probably lost about 40% of its original size. The other roast is done as well. And I'm going to take that out of the pot here and put it in a container. As it cools down, I'll add some of the juice to the container with this roast. But I'm not going to cut that one. I'm going to leave that one whole. If I were to cut that, put it in a container, then I'm just allowing the meat to dry out. So let's see. Let's test our temperature here. When I first took it out, it was at 163. Now at 159. So the meat has cooled off slightly, allowing it to rest. And now let's carve into it and see what we're going to take the outside edge off first. I usually like to make this a very thin cut. Oh yeah, that's perfect. That's rested. You can see even with that cut, a little bit of juice left the meat. Just a touch of red, just barely a touch of red inside. It's a perfect medium rare. Flip it over here for the camera to see. But look at that. It's cooked on the outside edges. You can see the seasoning. And right here, there's just a touch of red in there. So for wild game, that's a perfect medium rare. And what I found for venison roast or an elk roast, in this case it's a small elk roast, when it reaches 160, that's about the right temperature to pull it and let it rest. And having done this many times over the last 50 years, I just know that at 325 for 35, 40 minutes, that's the ideal time to pull it out of my little Dutch oven here. I'm going to move this aside because it's very hot. And let's do a little taste test here. Mm. Mm. So good. Natural, organically grown wild game. No artificial hormones. No preservatives. Just a light seasoning. Ah, that tastes good. Don't even need any A1 or Heinz 57 to ruin it with. But very good. Bon appetit, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned to Mav's Outdoor Adventures as I'll do more of these cooking segments of wild game and fish that I harvested from the great outdoors. If you like this video, please click the thumbs up icon. And to stay tuned for new video releases, please click the red subscribe button. All right, everybody. Take care.